In this week's Unplugged interview, we have Dave Love calling in. Dave has worked with NBA players as a shooting coach for over the last decade. He talks with us about what it takes to shoot at that level, and if you're a younger player, what can you do to become a better player? That and more on this week's interview with Dave Love. Can we talk a little bit about your background? And it's Dave Love calling in. For those of you listening to the podcast right now, NBA shooting coach, has been involved in the NBA now for over a decade. So, talk about your process of getting involved in the game of basketball and then being able to transition into the NBA field as an instructor.
I fell in love with basketball probably about 12 or 13 years old. Being Canadian, I started off playing hockey and was a decent hockey player, but knew that wasn't going anywhere. And once we moved into body checking in hockey, I said, enough of this business. I want nothing to do with that. And took up basketball and remember watching Larry Bird and Dominique Wilkins in I think it was like the '87 Eastern Conference Finals or somewhere around there, and it was the game that I think Larry had 21 in the fourth quarter, and Dominique had 17, and I fell in love with the game at that point. There was also a minor league basketball team in my hometown, Calgary, Alberta, Canada, that a fellow by the name of Chip England played on. And I was lucky enough to end up being a ball boy for that team for 3 years and formed a friendship with Chip that was a big brother, little brother type relationship. And Chip is now the student coach in San Antonio and the best in the business. And through his advice and following some stepping stones, I was able to go from a very average high school basketball player to coaching some shooting clinics for 12-year-old kids in Calgary, to doing clinics around the area, working with a university team for a number of years. And then one day Chip phoned and said that I should be for a phone call for the Phoenix Suns. That he recommended me for a shooting coach job, and it's sort of gone from there.
Awesome. And then, well, you kind of hit the NBA market as a shooting coach at a good time, considering that the three-point line and perimeter offense is becoming more and more of the game, especially with the way that Golden State has played. San Antonio has adopted Chip as a shooting coach. There are more full-time shooting coaches in the NBA, more than there has been ever before. Can you speak to the trend of shooting and the importance of having a specific shooting coach on an NBA team?
Well, it's just the evolution of the sport, and not even in the way like the Golden State and the premium on shooting, but just the business of it. That you start off with an accepted way of doing things. And initially it was a head coach and a couple of assistant coaches. And then the staff started to get a little bit bigger. I can remember about 15, maybe 20 years ago, Chip saying, well, there's batting coaches and pitching coaches in baseball. Why aren't there shooting coaches in basketball? And there were guys that would handle shooting, but there wasn't the focus on it. So the business has changed in that way, and people are starting to put a value on shooting and seeing that if we have somebody dedicated that's good at what they do, we can raise the ability of a number of our players on our roster, thus making our team better. And any business would be nuts not to look at that as an option.
So if you speak to shooting coaches out there and you're working for a player for the first time, and you're trying to determine how to break a habit, and you're trying to get an understanding of how he works, where do you like to start with that player from? Let's go from a positioning standpoint first. Like, where physically do you start with a player that's kind of ready to change some of the habits on his shooting technique?
The first thing I try and identify is the flight of the ball, and so I'll look at like the rotation of the basketball, because there's certain rotation that you get, this peak rotation that we love, that there's physics reasons behind why we like it, and if a player is able to get that kind of spin, then the chances of the ball going straight are dramatically increased. If they don't, the chances of the ball going straight are dramatically decreased. And so trying to assess what kind of spin do they get, how is the ball leaving their hand, what is their ball flight, do they shoot a flat shot, do they shoot a higher shot, are they consistent with their arc, are they inconsistent, do they tend to miss left or right, if so, which direction do they miss most often, and then assess why. Like, why do they get a flat shot? What is their body doing that is causing the ball to go flat? What is causing it to go less consistently, if that's what's happening? And then try, in that beginning of the first workout, to isolate the problem and learn to make a new move or learn to correct and form a new habit.
And then generally the reason for that ball flight not being exactly where do you want to go, for me, when I was a shooter in college and I've worked with players on shooting, we always talked about their, initial positioning and the foundation of where they had their hand on the ball. Do you have like a specific place you like players to have their hand on the basketball or position on their body, or does it change depending on the size of the player and their individual body mechanics?
I think in the general terms, you've got sort of a template that you're working off of, and I like to have the middle of the player's hand on the middle of the ball, and then we need the ball going up, so we need to be on the bottom of the ball. And I don't think any of that's revolutionary. I think that's pretty accepted as the accepted way to do things. I talked about I'll assess what is actually the middle of the player's hand, and we'll do like a couple of rudimentary measurements on a player because we've named one finger the middle finger, but when you take a grip, shooting grip on the basketball, for most players, I would say 90-95% of players, the middle finger isn't the middle of their hand, even though we've named it that. So we need to be aware of where the middle of their hand actually is, try to get the middle of the hand on the middle of the ball, and if we can push the middle of the ball with the middle of our hand along our target line, the ball will go straight. And so just kind of assessing how that player is built and trying to get them into a position where they're able to shoot the middle of the ball.
All right, Dave Love, NBA shooting coach, calling in to the Be Different podcast. And Dave, what about some advice for younger players, a sixth grader or a seventh grader that is trying to get better at the game of basketball? And every player at a young age wants to be a good shooter. They see Steph Curry shooting from 5 feet beyond the arc, Klay Thompson, and it's an epidemic that players immediately when they step on the court shoot from half court. But what advice do you give to a junior high player that's showing some promise as a player, working on his shot? What would you tell him in terms of how many shots maybe to take a day, what style of shots he's taking?
The biggest advice that I would give is to try and keep your shot as simple as you possibly can, and look at every aspect of your shot and just ask, is there a way to make it simple or more simple? And if there is, more simple is going to be more repeatable. If you're building a habit of making your shot complex, then you're making it more challenging for yourself to make a shot, and that's not what our goal is. That's the goal of the defense, to make the shot more complicated. So really work to make it as simple as you possibly can. That starts with good balance. It starts with getting your non-shooting hand off the ball. Staying inside your range will help with that, because as soon as you add distance, you're going to add what I call negative energy to try and get the ball to the hoop, whereas we want our habits to just form positive energy to keep the ball on line with the hoop and get it going up in the air. So just focus on simple. I know flash is exciting, but especially at the youth levels, the defense isn't that good. So if you have good fundamentals and you're able to make open shots, you're going to get a lot of those, and you stand a chance to become a really good player just by being able to do the simple, easy things well.
And Dave, are you still running your company as well for younger players? I know that you're working a lot with NBA professional guys, but do you still have time to work with younger groups as well?
Yeah, we're actually transitioning to Love of the Game, which you can find by visiting theloveofthegame.com, if you'll allow me to make that little plug. And mostly it's around Canada, and I'm in the process of training coaches now to teach my curriculum, and our goal is to take the clinics to these smaller markets that don't always get high quality instruction coming to them. That if you're typically in a town of 10,000 people that's an hour away from a big city, you usually have to go to the big city to get high quality instruction. And our goal is to send those instructors to those markets. With that, I do some clinics myself still, and try and pinpoint locations that I've always wanted to go to. So I've done some international clinics and want to do more of that. But I also go down to Cleveland, Ohio for a weekend and do some clinics with schools. We use it as a fundraiser for them, and get some great information out to the kids.
All right, awesome. So for theloveofthegame.com, would that be the best way to kind of locate your work and where you'll be heading?
Yeah, not for the love of the game, just theloveofthegame.com.
Okay.
And that's the clinics, and then I have some online teaching that I do also on coachdavelove.com.
Okay, and then I know I subscribe to your newsletter, I think over the last week or so. So I have that come into my email, and I've already read a few of you have posts about certain fundamentals of the game. If you're someone who's diving in as a coach or as a player, I actually really like the writings that you have up there. I think you have about like 30. There's a bunch of them up there. I read a handful of them. So I'd say if
we've got a number of blogs on there, and I send out about an email a week. Just trying to really teach people about and really open up a conversation, and get a bunch of people replying, and those replies come right to me, and I get to ask specific questions that they've always wondered about, and then I get ideas on how to turn that into a blog and teach more people. So it's been a lot of fun to interact with everybody.
Awesome. So make sure you follow Dave. Twitter's a good way to follow. Just Dave Love on Twitter, and then the Love of the Game.
Coach Dave Love on Twitter.
Coach Dave Love on Twitter. All right, Dave, to finish out the interview, and we appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a lot on your plate. We do 10 questions with every guest that we have on the show, and these 10 questions, I like to say they're simple, but they get a little bit more challenging. So one, we start you kind of easy. We go through 10, becomes a little bit more difficult. These are all yes or no questions, true or false. You will only have one option, and you cannot explain yourself on the question. First thing that comes to mind, you have to do it. I promise I won't get you in trouble. I promise. All right? They're tough. These are tough, and I never prep anybody for this. They just know when they end the interview, you got these 10 questions. Are you ready to go?
This is going to be really boring for the listeners, because I'm going to listen and really take my time to think through it. So there's going to be 15 minutes of dead air as I try and figure out who's better, Steph or Clay.
That's okay. We're completely fine with that. However you want to answer. All right. This is 10 questions with Dave Love. Question 1. Would you rather spend a night at home or a night in the gym?
Home.
Pepperoni pizza or a hamburger?
Oh my God, these are hard. These are the easy ones too.
These are considered the somewhat easy ones, because then we're going to go basketball from 3 to 10.
I'm going pizza.
All right, here we go. Better shooter, Klay Thompson or Reggie Miller?
Clay.
More important for a shooter, technique or confidence?
Technique.
Over under. I have rebounded over 1 million shots since 2001.
I got to figure out how much million is.
So if
I'm going to guess over.
Yeah, I would think you're over. True or false? If I receive a call or email from their son or daughter, from a parent talking about their son or daughter looking for training, and the parent says that their kid's best quality is defense, I immediately think, oh man, this is going to be rough.
False.
True or false? Lonzo Ball currently has the ugliest shot in the NBA.
I'm going to abstain from that question. I don't like to say anything that would be deemed as insulting, or and I don't want to imply anything with that answer either. Like, these guys, they work really, really hard.
No, that's fair. Yes or
I'm
no?
going to opt out of that one.
That's fair. Yes or no? The granny shot is the most underutilized shot in the game of basketball today.
No.
True or false? I record all workouts and send edited Instagram clips to my players after every workout.
False.
That's a good question because pretty much every other trainer does. True or false? Steph Curry is the best shooter of all time.
True.
Dave, that's it. That's your 10 questions are up.
I felt like those got easier towards the end too. That hamburger versus pizza one.
Yeah.
That was
the pepperoni pizza hamburger one is challenging. I thought the Klay Thompson, Reggie Miller one. I was interested in your answer because I would say Klay as well.
But it's like one shot with the game on the line. That changes my answer just a little bit too.
Gotcha.
But you didn't give me the chance to explain. So I think that's probably the best shooting form in the world.
And the technique confidence one is a good one. They obviously go hand in hand, but to get confidence, you need technique.
That was not that tough for me because I don't. If you're just trying to instill confidence in somebody so that they believe that they're a great shooter, that's fake.
Right.
That can go away very, very quickly. But when the confidence comes from seeing results, that's real.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a huge. I think you have to build a true confidence rather than just trying to instill any kind of confidence in a player.
Perfect. All right. And Steph Curry, he is fantastic as a shooter. You have to enjoy watching him play and as a shooting coach as well. He's crazy. I mean, the guy is unbelievable. It's insane. And he doesn't go on the crazy slumps, and he's taking very, very difficult shots.
Yes, both those things together. The fact that he's so consistent shooting something that, like, nobody in the world has had to shoot more difficult shots than him. And ever. I think he's consistently off the charts with the degree of difficulty of shots that he shoots, and then he's in the top 5 consistently in three-point shooting. It's unbelievable what he does.
The guy's insane, and you'd expect Golden State to be at the top once again. And Kevin Durant we didn't speak on, but, I mean, his ability to make shots at his size, his ability to move, create space, technique, I mean, that has to be another guy on your list from a shooting coach perspective that's pretty unique to watch as well.
Yeah. Unique is a great word for him, and there are other guys that with shot mechanics that I would prefer, but when he talks straight ability to make shots, he's crazy.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thank you so much for taking time to call in and speak with the Be Different podcast. Next time you're in Ohio, maybe if you want to do something close by, make sure you reach out to us. But we really appreciate you coming on, offering your insight with how much that you have going on. So thanks so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Yep. See you, Dave.